Hi. You're listening to the Corporate Cleanse podcast, where we talk about the pros and cons of corporate life and how I, a former fancy executive, hit full burnout and am now on a journey to explore how we all can maintain our sanity and sense of self, all while climbing the corporate ladder. I hope you enjoy listening along with me and know that everyone needs, occasionally, a corporate cleanse. I've been on a little bit of an emotional roller coaster as of late. Am I going through a midlife crisis? Is this a millennial midlife crisis? Or has my whole life been a crisis and this is just the next era of crisis? I don't know, maybe millennial midlife crises is making pottery and fighting against capitalism with a podcast. But this is what ChatGPT says about what a millennial midlife crisis is. Okay, are you ready? A midlife crisis for millennials is a period of introspection and self-doubt that occurs in the middle of their lives, usually between the ages of 30 and 40. I am smack dab, I'm 35. This can be a time of significant changes, both personal and professional, that can lead to feelings of dissatisfaction and anxiety. Millennials may experience a midlife crisis as they begin to feel the weight of responsibilities such as careers, finances, relationships, and children. They may question whether they are on the right path and whether they have accomplished enough. They may also struggle with feelings of regret and the fear of missing out on opportunities. In some cases, a midlife crisis for millennials can lead to significant life changes, such as career changes, divorce, or a desire to travel or explore new hobbies. However, it is important to note that not all millennials will experience a midlife crisis, and those who do may experience it differently based on their individual circumstances. So first, I absolutely agree that there should be more mindful regulations and standards around AI, because damn, why you gotta expose me like that, ChatGPT, in front of all of these new people? But that is exactly what I'm going through. And since leaving my fancy corporate executive job, I have, arguably 40 to 50 more hours a week. But yet, I am still feeling like my time is not my own. Like, my anxiety around what I'm doing with my life has kind of just ratcheted up. And so has the weight of family and children and finances. And man, for those that are balancing failing health of parents while also trying to raise good kids, tough job market, crazy inflation, while also trying to do self-work so you show up in the world like a good person, I see you. This is hard. This is really hard. And amidst all of these pressures, the way I usually feel my safest is money. I feel like I'm playing this video game and I have to just accumulate resources. This is how I'll be safe. This is how I'll afford all of the armor I need, right? To feel safe. Money is the fastest way for me to feel safe, no matter what happens. And I feel like the universe is really testing me on this. Oh, you think you've done work? Let's pressure test all of your deepest anxieties. I feel like the universe is A/B testing me, So the biggest question that has been on my mind is if and when I'm going back to corporate life. And, a couple of my friends and family have messaged and just asked in just really nice ways. And I'll, if I go back and the answer is yes, then when? When? For right now, when people ask, it has been a problem for future Jen that I'm trying to avoid, that I'm trying to forget that I have to make that decision eventually. And I feel like, when you're at a restaurant and you don't know what to order, and so you're just going to wait for the waiter to get to you and just let pressure decide. I think that's about where I am, that I'll just wait until I absolutely have to make a decision, and then I'll just make a decision out of anxiety and pressure. But I have been thinking a lot about my own personal, quote, return to work. LOL. There's some hybrid work humor for you. But my own personal return to work. So I've been thinking about my own personal return to work, and I've been thinking about how I want to show up for my hypothetical new corporate life era. The things that I would do differently if I were to start again. So today, we're going to talk about the 5 things I would have done differently in my career. Out of, the 13 years of me climbing the corporate ladder, what are some of the regrets I have, and maybe what are some of the lessons learned I have? So some context. I have worked since I was 16, through high school, through college, through my pregnancy. I only took 2 weeks of maternity leave, by the way, through my 20s up until 4 months ago. I just sort of worked and I didn't stop. I just sort of got my first job at Domino's and then just never looked back. I was like, this is a great train for me to be on. I will stay on this train until I couldn't anymore. So my first job was at Domino's, and I was such a people pleaser. I was hustling for approval, and I was good at my job. Like, I could assemble those Domino's pizza boxes in like a second, like in one motion, like done. I don't know if you can see this. If you watch this on YouTube, you'll be able to see the motion that I'm doing. That is the pizza box assembling. And I got really good at it. And I was cheerful. I always tried my best. I got a 15-cent raise. Now listen, my boss pranked me one time. He called me into the office and he was like, hey, a customer called in to complain because he said you were too cheerful. And listen, when I say that, my heart dropped and I was like, oh my God, someone doesn't like me? And then he was like, haha, it's just a joke. We're giving you a raise and you're employee of the month, right? Haha, I still think about that. To this day, I still think about that because it affected me so much because I was such a people pleaser. After Domino's, I got a job at Sears as a cashier because I had heard they paid $7.25 an hour. And I was like, yep, I'm going to go do that. I ended up being a cashier selling tools. I sold lawn and garden equipment. I sold tractors and lawnmowers. And an hour, when you broke down my hourly wage, that was a good job. Sears was a good job. I worked at American Eagle for a little while, actually while I also worked at Sears. So I would go to the mall. I would work my 9 to 5 shift with Sears. I would go into the bathroom. I would change. I would eat a loaf of bread from Subway because that guy gave me a loaf of bread and a cup of ranch for 25 cents. Okay, listen, I don't know what I did to garner this relationship from the Subway guy, but he gave me Subway loaf of bread and a ranch for 25 cents. And I was like, I don't know, 17. So I was like, this is great. I'm filled. I'm satiated. And then I would go do my 5 till close, 5 till 10 p.m. shift at American Eagle. I did a brief stint at Abercrombie, which I will talk about later, because that is the only other time in my life that I have been fired was from Abercrombie and Fitch, and some time at Barnes & Noble. So this has sort of been my my career journey. Then I worked at this company in Utah called Vivint. It's a security company. Kind of one of those not the best business practices company, one of those. And I worked my way up. I worked my way up through scheduling. I did a special scheduling team. I was a manager. I worked in the licensing department. I've always just kind of been okay, what's next? What's next? And then I started my stint in tech. I did 4 companies in tech. And that's where most of my kind of core career history has been in corporate life, in tech, specifically startups between Series A, Series D in marketing. So again, over the last 4 months, I've done a lot of reflection. I've done a lot of evaluation. I've kind of looked back at my career history and each step along the way. And I've come up with kind of the 5 things that I wish that I would have done differently. The 5 lessons I wish someone would have told me and that I would have believed if someone were to talk to me early in my career. So number 1, be brave enough, be vulnerable enough to ask questions when you don't know. If you don't know something, ask. find out. I'll give kind of where this has been most painful for me. It's been finances. So the most financial advice I got from my parents was to pay my tithing and to save my money. I grew up LDS, so pay your tithing and save your money. And that was just kind of it. That was like, that should carry you through at least your 30s, right? No, I knew nothing about investing, credit scores, 401ks, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Like, I knew nothing about this world. In fact, I got a Gap credit card when I was 17. Don't ever get the Gap credit card. I think that just barely rolled off my credit score, right? Because I knew nothing. I knew nothing about this world. And part of startup currency, I guess, or the reward system in startups and in tech is company stock. Both RSUs, so restricted stock units, and options are forms of equity compensation that companies use to incentivize and reward their employees. There are big differences between the two, right? There are vesting schedules, there's strike prices, there's tax implications, all of which I didn't have a clue about. So my first tech job was Qualtrics, okay? I was employee number 40, and I think about 2 or 3 years into my employment at Qualtrics, they decided to make employees owners of the company by giving them RSUs. And my head was so filled with kind of like imposter syndrome, but also like this weird Stockholm syndrome-esque gratitude, like level of gratitude, that I didn't want to show any sign of weakness. Like, I didn't want people finding out that I was a fraud and just booting me out of this rocket ship, right? Because that was what startups promise, is this rocket ship. And I was like, well, I'm just lucky to be here. So I got my letter of how many RSUs I was going to get. My boss sat us down. I remember this. They had the big room. It was like a big kind of thin rectangular room where, like, I think engineering worked at one point, but it was behind doors, like glass doors. My boss was in there like solo behind a table with like this stack of papers, and we would each go in there and she'd give us the number and then we'd go back out, and we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't talk about how much we got or anything. And so my boss gave me this letter, and she was like, hey, I'm really excited about this number. Like, verbatim, I remember this experience. I'm really excited about this number. You know, you've been here for a long time and the company really values you. So I'm really excited to give you this number. And I just like sat there nodding like an idiot because I was like, cool, thanks. Here's my number. And I didn't really understand what this meant, but I also didn't want to seem stupid because everyone else seemed to know. So I just, again, nodded like an idiot and smiled and was like, okay, thanks. And after 4 years of being with Qualtrics, I didn't ask. I just sort of let this be something I had. I went home and I put that piece of paper like in my important documents folder. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. So I just like put it in my important documents, like accordion file, and then didn't really think about it. And after leaving Qualtrics, I ended up getting nothing from my time at Qualtrics after 4 years being employee number 40 because I didn't know and I was too afraid to ask. So what Qualtrics had done was they had given you RSUs that had to vest. By the time I left Qualtrics, I think I had almost 2 years, 3 years of vesting on that stock, but they did a double trigger event. This meant that your stock had to vest first, and then second, you had to be employed with the company when the liquidation event happened. So even though I vested this stock, because I didn't stay with the company until the liquidation event, I lost it all, even that was vested. And, you know, this really haunted me because Qualtrics obviously did very, very well. And in my tech career, a lot of people were like, wow, you must have done really well after your time at Qualtrics. And I feel super dumb saying I didn't. I didn't get anything because I didn't understand and I was too afraid to ask. So that was my first really hard lesson. Second lesson, I went from Qualtrics to Adobe, which was like different. Not a startup. Adobe's a huge $billion company. And when I joined, I got some stock. The recruiter negotiated some stock and again, RSUs, and gave me this number. And I was like, that sounds great. So I said yes. And because of my incredible leaders, so Dre, Dave, and Brian, if you are listening, like, you guys are the real ones, because they really fought hard for the employees on their team to get stock. And I got more stock every year. Every time I got sort of my like annual raise, I'd also get this RSU grant. And 4 years into my time, 3.5 years into my time at Adobe, I remember someone emailing the whole company saying, E-Trade is here. If you have questions, E-Trade is here. Schedule some time. Go ask them. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to schedule some time with E-Trade because I have no idea what this number means. Like when I log into my account in E-Trade, I see this number. I have no idea what it means. And I was like, God, I was like 26 at the time. But I think so much time had passed that I was like, well, I can't ask now. I've pretended to know this for like 8 years. I can't pretend. I can't ask now. I can't let everyone know that I don't know. So I scheduled time with the E-Trade guy and I went to go talk to him. We logged into my account and he was like, oh, there's like a good nest egg here for you. And I was like, no, that can't all be my money. And he said, yeah, it is. And I was like, okay. And he was very kind. I was like, listen, you're going to have to tell me this, like that you're going to have to explain this to me like I know nothing, like zero. And he was really kind and really, really generous with his information. And I sold a good chunk of it because I needed the money. And, listen, I have some regrets because Adobe's stock price just like kept going up. But that was a good lesson for me that I was like, you need to ask if you don't know, and it's okay if you don't know. And usually people are kind about it. And money is whatever you need it to be, whenever you need it to be. So I was in a position where I couldn't just let that sit. I needed to liquidate some of those funds for just personal reasons, and I did. My next experience with stock was with Weave. So with Weave, I got options. So this is where you get sort of like a reserved amount that you then have to purchase. Usually when you leave the company, you get like 30 to 90 days to buy these options. They're like, okay, you've left the company, whatever you vested, you need to purchase from the company within this time frame. You can extend that. That is something I didn't know at Weave, that you can ask. You can ask to extend it from like 1 year to 10 years. Like if you don't have the money to buy that vested options, you can ask. Just be like, hey, can I have a year? I know some people that have gotten up to 10 years to exercise those options. These were all things that I slowly started to learn just from talking to people. And again, I would just smile and nod like I knew when I didn't know. I didn't know anything. And I wish that I had asked in a more timely fashion than this sort of like reactive response to when something happened to me. I was like, okay, I got to figure it out. I gotta just hurry and figure out what I'm doing with this. We've ended up going public at a terrible time, and their stock was not good and hasn't been good. But, I've gotten about 2.5 times my investment in whatever I used to exercise my options. So over the years, I have learned that there is a lot to know. And if you don't know those things, you're going to miss out. You're going to leave money on the table because there are so many exceptions to be made, so many questions to ask. And at a high leadership level, you can also ask for many things when you join that I didn't know. You could ask for something like an acceleration clause. So let's say you start at a startup and that company gets sold. You can ask for an acceleration clause that when the company's control shifts, your stock will just vest all the way. I didn't know that until recently, if there's, a company ownership change. And so again, if you don't know these things, you won't know to ask, and you'll miss out You really will. So if you're like me and this is just so foreign, do some research, ask people. Usually people are so kind and so generous with information, but don't let yourself be ignorant because you're embarrassed of not knowing. It almost feels like it's an exclusive club, right? As if to know all of these things, to know that, maybe your dad was like an investment banker and you know all of these things and it's just second nature to you. There's a lot of humans that don't know this, that weren't raised in that environment or weren't privy to this information. So there is still a lot I don't know in this space, but the lesson that I have learned is to ask if you don't know. No one is going to berate you. No one's going to fire you on the spot. No one's going to humiliate you for not knowing. And usually, most of the people who have cracked this code, most of the people that have done a lot of research in their time are more than willing to share and help. I have left a lot of money on the table. I've limited myself by not knowing all the options available to me. And I've ultimately done myself a disservice for not asking and not being brave and humble enough to admit that I don't know, which is 100% a fine thing to be and to say that I don't know. This is also a really great way to be more inclusive and to craft a more inclusive environment at your company, is to share knowledge. Some people come from backgrounds, again, where this information wasn't shared or known, and those who are sort of financially savvy versus those who aren't doesn't have to be this exclusive club. It doesn't have to be purposely excluding people. I once had an employee that had been with the company for a long time, and because of this, they had a lot of company stock options, a lot were vested. I think almost 100% were vested because of how long they had been with the company. Sometimes the company will let you sell some of that on the secondary. I mean, this is an option that is available if you ask. Whether it's right, whether it's like the right financial decision for you, I won't weigh in on, but at least asking helps you know your options. If you're trying to buy a house, if you're trying to put a kid through college, like ask what your options are. Ask to know the fine print, the terms and conditions, the details. Find your finance team and ask, or your legal team and ask some questions. Don't be left in the dark. Okay, lesson number 2. Don't wait for the tiara. So one thing that I found out in my career, I think someone told me this. They were like, oh, you have tiara syndrome. And I was like, I don't know what that means. But if you Google tiara syndrome, it basically means that you are going to wait for someone to come give you the tiara. One of my core beliefs when I started in corporate America was that it was always going to be fair. LOL. Poor naive Jen. I thought it was always going to be fair, that if you work hard, you will get what you deserve. And my first job in particular, I again had this sort of Stockholm-esque syndrome of gratitude, feeling like I was undeserving to be there. I was undeserving of this rocket ship that everyone promised me. And I was willing to do anything to prove value. I believed in meritocracy. I knew nothing of unconscious bias back then. I just thought, this is a fair world for me to be in. Everything's going to be good, and I will get what I deserve. And I'll give you this example. It's a really dumb example, but for those of you who don't know, Qualtrics is known for their swag. They have always had great swag, t-shirts, hoodies, water bottles. When I worked at Qualtrics, I was in charge of swag, and they wanted to create a swag closet in the company, in the office. And it ended up being like the old finance office that we were going to build out and design and make like a storefront for Qualtrics swag for people that came and visited and potential clients and all these things. It took a lot of work. It was not, strategic by any means, but it was a big project that I was handed that I was excited to do. And I was like, listen, I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this. It's going to be great. And I did. And I was damn proud of it. And then in a company all hands meeting on a Friday, Ryan Smith gets up and thanks another employee for that swag closet. Like, doesn't mention me, doesn't do anything. And the betrayal that I felt, because I knew for sure that corporate America was going to be fair. I knew for sure that the meritocracy model was foolproof or fail-proof. Like, I knew that if I worked hard, I was going to get the tiara. Not so. Not so. And I spent so much of my career hustling, waiting for the tiara. At Qualtrics, again, I had started the customer success function kind of before customer success was a thing. I started this function, and I was hired a mentor from Bain to come in and help craft this department. And the night before we were supposed to present our model, our proposal for the customer success team, my mentor emailed me and said, "Hey, I think it's better if I present this without you. Maybe you shouldn't attend the meeting." And again, naive Jen thought that corporate America is fair. This makes sense. I think you're right. I think it'll go better if I'm not there, but I'll get my due. I'll get whatever I deserve from all this work that I've put in. And I ended up getting moved to a different department, and this person got to run the team and the organization and the department. And you know what? I didn't speak up. I just let it stew. And all of these moments of silence, waiting for the tiara and not getting it, those just became the bitter seeds planted on my heart, where those became more pieces of armor that I took with me from job to job. These became the gigantic chip on my shoulder that, again, I carried with me from company to company of like, this is fine. You ignore this, whatever this is, this huge chip on my shoulder. Don't worry about it. We're going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. We're not going to have any emotional outbursts. Like, I'm well adjusted. All of those moments of silence waiting for the tiara became a huge hindrance in my career. And so the lesson that I learned here is don't wait for the tiara. Manage your individual perception and make the ask. Whatever you need, if you need recognition, if you need a raise, if you need a promotion to feel like that's what you deserve, then you are the only one responsible for advocating for that and giving that to yourself or asking for it. Don't just wait. Don't just say, you know what, I've worked my ass off for 3 years. My boss is going to give this to me. I know he is. Year over year, he hasn't, but he's going to give it to me one of these days. Don't wait. Don't wait for the tiara. Ask for it. Make a case. Manage how you're perceived in the organization. Pick strategic projects, and then make your ask. Again, whatever it is that you need to feel good, to feel rewarded, to feel recognized. The key here is to be persistent without being incessant, right? Like, ask and be persistent about getting what you deserve. But there is a really fine line between persistent and incessant. And as a people manager, I've also had people that have asked for things so constantly and so kind of like never ending that it becomes really hard for you to advocate for that person at that point. So really focus on being persistent and not being incessant. And that's another one. Ask for people to advocate for you, right? If your boss is going to be in a meeting where they're talking about your department, make your ask for your boss to call you out, to say, hey, so-and-so has been really instrumental in this project. I would like to see them put up for a promotion or given more responsibility or given a bigger team or given bigger budgets. Advocate for yourself. Find people to advocate for you and make the ask. Don't wait. Okay, lesson number 3. I wish that I had not cared so much about what people thought of me. Part of waiting for the tiara was this almost desperate need to be liked, to be respected. Again, if you don't feel deserving of where you're at, you feel almost desperate to get that approval. And that's where I was. I cared what everyone thought of me. And let me just tell you how kind of deep this goes, okay? When I tell you that I was a people pleaser at Domino's, I am still a people pleaser. That has never gone away. When ChatGPT gives me the answer to my prompt, oh, the urge I feel to type thank you. That is how much of a people pleaser I am, that I want to say thank you to this robot that has no feelings. Well, hopefully no feelings. I want to say thank you because I care so much about what that whatever thinks about me. That's how deep this goes. So when I was at Qualtrics, I felt this really, really strongly, this need to be liked. And there was he was a founder at Qualtrics. It was Ryan Smith's brother. He came from Google. He was like this wonderkind. Like he was just God in cowboy boots. And we were like, we all just need this person to like us. And he kind of took me under his wing and helped kind of mold me into a people manager. And part of this process was the way Qualtrics did their recognition systems, their like quarterly bonuses, was on a bell curve. So as a people manager, you would rank your team from, highest to lowest, and the highest would get big bonuses, middle would get middle bonuses, and the lower performers would get no bonus. That's what we were supposed to do. And I wanted to prove so badly that I had what it took to be a good manager. I wanted to prove to this person that I had what it takes. I was like, you in those cowboy boots, I'm going to prove to you that I am up to snuff, that I am amazing, and that, the person that you need to hold up on a pedestal because I'm so amazing. And so even though every single person on my team had killed it that quarter, they had gone above and beyond, and they did it through duress and through being a little bit disrespected in the org. Like, we had a tough time, my first team and I. Because of this need to prove, I didn't go out on a limb, and I didn't give a bonus to one human. And this conversation I had with this human it still haunts me. It still haunts me to this day. They cried. They had no idea why they weren't getting their bonus. They had expected and relied on this bonus, and I really didn't have any good reasons that I didn't give that person a bonus, because I was like, well, this is just what so-and-so is telling me to do. I didn't give that person what they deserved because I was worried about my individual perception and my ability to be liked. And I still think about this. This is still one of the biggest regrets that I have, that my need to be liked overshadowed someone else's, deserving recognition, and made me less of a human, made me less empathetic and fair in my dealings. And I wish that I had not spent so much of my career being that person that was willing to throw other people under the bus, because I cared so much about what people thought of me. Okay, number 4, prioritizing relationships. And I want to be specific here. Prioritizing relationships inside of work. Maybe someone commented on a recent LinkedIn post and was like, will you do a segment about how to balance your corporate career and your ladder climbing with, having healthy relationships outside of work? I was like, yeah, that'll probably be something we'll do in the future, an episode. But I want to specifically talk about this lesson, that is prioritizing relationships inside of work. Let's face it, we spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our friends and family, like probably combined. Like, our coworkers get some of our best. They get our best hours. They get our best energy. They get our best creativity. And oftentimes, unfortunately, our family and friends kind of just get what's left over at the end of the day, as we're like haggard. Our coworkers get a lot of our time and a lot of our best, and yet not a lot of us fully embrace this connection. I didn't for a long, long time. Part of what hustle culture and this idea of like a fair meritocracy and ladder climbing did to me was make me hyper competitive. Hyper competitive. Sure, I made friends at work. Like, I still have some great connections. I still grab lunch and coffee with some. But I realize I would often choose myself over those friendships. I mean, like, not 100% of the time, but under duress to get ahead, I would choose myself over my coworkers. And I think you can really tell a lot about somebody, about a person's character, by how they act under duress. When push comes to shove, you really see who they really are. And a lot of the time, I wasn't great. I wasn't great. I would often hear examples of coworkers who were like at each other's weddings or would stay at each other's houses when they were visiting an area or like have met their parents. Why wasn't I like that? Why didn't I have these long-standing connections with these people that I've spent so much time and energy with? One woman I worked with that I still to this day adore, she was the perfect person that you would just want in your corner, in your life, no matter what. She was brilliant. She is brilliant. She didn't go anywhere. We don't work together anymore, but she didn't die. I feel like I needed to clarify that. She was brilliant. She was funny. She was kind. She was caring. She is absolutely someone that I wish, would be at my child's wedding, right? I wish I would have been a better friend to her in the workplace. We had this like group project once, and because my reputation was at stake as well, I would always take this opportunity to question whether her plan was built out completely. Like, I would raise my hand and I would kind of criticize. And in not so many words, throw her under the bus so that I could be looked at as more put together. And I'm still bummed, man. I'm still bummed that I didn't do a better job being on her side and creating trust and safety there. Because at the end of the day, you really need allies in the workplace. If you make an enemy out of everyone, you're not getting much done, and man, you're not very liked, and you're not going to have a great time. So even though I was so driven and ambitious in my career, I wish that I would have prioritized a little bit more trust and safety for the people around me. Even if that meant that I didn't look like the most excellent or the top of the list or top marks every quarter, right? I wish I would have been a little bit more human to these people that are just trying their best, and been honestly a little bit more empathetic for myself too, that I was also just trying my best. Okay, last one. Last thing I wish I would have done in my career. I wish that I would have examined and addressed the chip on my shoulder. I just let it be there. I was like, this is just going to be an elephant in the room forever. Like, that's not something I need to tackle. Corporate life is tough on all of us. But I really started to wear my trials and the chip on my shoulder as like a badge of honor. Like, look how much I've overcome in my life. Look how much I've done. Look at all the shit that I've waded through, and I still came out on top. So it became this badge of honor rather than really examining the decisions that I made and some of the behaviors I exhibited because of this chip on my shoulder. I wish that I would have examined it. I wish that I would have been more curious and willing to look at the anger inside me and the bitterness inside me and the competitiveness and just all of these pieces that for a long time I was like, these are all the things that got me to where I am. These things that probably aren't pretty, got me to the sea level. So I'm good. I'm doing good. These are good. These are my allies. These are my superpowers. They were not. They definitely worked against me more than they worked for me. And I wish that I would have taken time to examine what these were doing to me and whether these chips on my shoulder and all these bitter seeds planted in my heart were actually serving me or holding me back. And I chose to see them as serving me when in actuality they were holding me back. And I didn't learn that until I had just a full breakdown 13 years later. So don't wait. Don't wait on examining whatever you're angry about, whatever you're holding on to, whatever grudges are still hanging around, right? So I've been an entry-level employee. I've served pizzas. I've been a C-level executive and everything in between. And some of the things I would tell my little 19-year-old self, my sweet little 19-year-old self, I would ask more questions. Don't let yourself be ignorant. Be brave. Be vulnerable. Nothing bad's going to happen if you don't know. The only bad things that are going to happen is if you allow yourself to not know. Don't wait for the tiara. Advocate for yourself and ask others to advocate for you. I wish I had not cared so much about what others thought about me and gone out on a limb for people more, for people that deserved it. I wish I would have utilized my authority and my power to help others. I wish I would have prioritized work relationships. These people, again, that you spend between 40 and 50 hours a week with. That is not marginal. That is honestly more time than I spend with my husband. And examine the chip on your shoulder. Don't hang on to the anger and don't ignore it. Take a look. Take a look at your career story. Take a look at what the things are that you're proud of, that you're grateful for, and the things that maybe you've overcome. And if you're still carrying those around in a bag, those bitter seeds, if you're still carrying them around in a bag from company to company, saying, I am fine, it's time to look in that bag. It's time. It just is. It's time to look. So yeah, that's it. 5 things I would have done differently in my career. That's all I have for you this week. Thanks for listening, everyone.